What's going on? You know what time it is. This is the Birdcage LLC. We got a special edition tonight. We're getting ready to talk about some young men that have an opportunity to get to the league, but they're standing on the shoulders of many giants that have come before. So we got our HBCU special. So let's get to it. You know how we get down. You either get right or you get left. You getting right. You up in here. Let's go. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? You know how we get down. You either get right or you get left. You're getting right. But the only way that we're going to get right before this NFL draft, we talk about all kinds of kids coming from so many different schools. And when you sit back and you think about it, the journey for African Americans have always been difficult when it comes to certain aspects in the NFL. But when they had their opportunity, they took it and they ran with it. When you look at gentlemen like Tank Younger, that came through the league and was tough as hell coming through as a linebacker and a fullback. You look at Art Shell, who actually became the first black head coach in the modern era. Before him, it was Fritz Pollard. But Art Shell came out of University of Maryland Eastern Shore that produced Mr. Johnny Sample. You know, so many great players. And then I got to also talk about my favorite player was at the beginning of the video. You talk about Mr. Walter Payton. To me, will always be the greatest running back of all time. Came out of Tiny Jackson State. And right up the road, you got Baton Rouge, home of Mel Blount, Aeneas Williams, Harold Carmichael, and so many that have come through. I mean, HBCU history in the NFL is so rich, it's just ridiculous. But we're going to go ahead and talk about it, man. These young men stand on the shoulders of those who have come before them. And when you look at what those guys have done and had to open the doors for them to get into the NFL, it definitely is a humbling process for these young men, but they also have to be hungry because they don't get as many opportunities as so many others. Shout out to one of our Birdcage alum. We got to mention him, Coach Anthony Blaylock, who played for the Cleveland Browns, played for the legendary Wild Bill Hayes at Winston-Salem State. He just got into the CIAA Hall of Fame not too long ago, had a solid career. So when we sit back and we look at everything, HBCUs have literally provided so much for the NFL. So the way that myself and my guys from the Birdcage, we can give back is by making sure that we spotlight these young men. And this is the only way that we know, because without HBCUs, we don't get into these big schools that you see the kids coming out of the Georgias, the Floridas, the Florida States, and all these schools that did not want African Americans. So we're going to put some respect on these schools tonight. But starting off, man, I know a lot of people didn't get to see the intro. Some did, some didn't. But, you know, we added in some legendary players pretty much that were there. But we got to go ahead and get this thing started off right tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and talk about a young man who the Falcons could use expeditiously. We have a young man by the name of Jeremiah Williams. You're talking about one of the best defensive tackles in the SWAC. And when you sit back and you look at him, you're like, Jesus, he's a compact 300, over 300 pounder that's coming out of Jackson State. When you sit back and you think about him, he's really a good kid. Got a motor on him, tough, durable, and built to last. Built like a Ford truck. But when you look at him, he's 6'2", 314 pounds. He started his career at Holmes County Central High School. He's a redshirt senior, so he got to play for Deion Sanders. When you look at some of the honors that he had, he was a 2025 preseason first team All SWAC, 2024 FCS All Central All American, and then he was preseason All SWAC by coaches and also with Phil Steele. And then he was the Celebration Bowl most valuable player for Jackson State. And when you talk about defensive line, the Atlanta Falcons have struggled with being able to bring in talent, but this is a young man that can come in here and actually devour the competition. Hell, we just lost Ruka Roro, but I'll be honest with you, I think he would be a hell of a replacement. But here we go. This is Mr. Jeremiah Williams. We're going to play a little bit of his footage for you. Not going to play all of it because we got a lot of guys we got to get through. 6'2", 342 pounds. Fair use, fair use, fair use. As you can see, he doesn't give up on plays. He's one of those guys that even if he's out of a play, he's still in a play. He's able to clog up the hole, get off his block, and actually create a lot of confusion in the middle. There's another one. He's very slick, gets up under the guard, he definitely gets in there. You're talking about a true zero tech that's actually a bully. Excuse me, that was a center. You look at it, he's never out of a play. He does not quit. He has motor. Now, if I got to compare him to somebody, he's a little bit big. He's pretty much another Grady Jarrett type of defensive tackle when you talk about him and actually chase the quarterback down there, a little bit athletic. And when you look at how he can move from sideline to sideline, that is a big man. So when you sit back and you look at him, he's one of these guys that could come into the door. If you have him as an undrafted free agent, I get it. But you also have to look at it from this point here. We don't have a true zero technique right now. We're not in a position to where we have a lot of draft picks. This is a young man that you can get as an undrafted free agent if you don't take him in the lower rounds. And when you really look at that, he runs under a 5.4 pretty much in his 40. He's not slow. Big, athletic, strong, very smart football player, and somebody that you can trust and lean on because, again, he's played with bad ankles, played with a broken hand. This guy is tough and this guy is durable when you talk about in that defensive tackle mode that we haven't had in a while. Now, he's got some flashes of Grady Jarrett, but if I got to compare him, he's a poor man's Rod Coleman. Most of my Falcon fans, you know about the legendary Rod Coleman at that defensive tackle spot. And let's be honest, this kid has a motor like Rod, strong as hell too. But we have to see him in a situation against NFL talent because, again, we're just going off of what we see for college. But he's a guy that can come in here, learn the system, and I think Coach Ollie could get the most out of him. Now, we also got to talk about one of his teammates that's actually going to be listed when we talk about the linebacker spot. We got Mr. Reed Pullingham, who also is a Jackson State kid. This is number 2. We got to go through all these guys that we have picked out for tonight. We're talking about linebacker depth, a guy that can run from sideline to sideline, a guy that is dangerous, and he has a high football IQ. And this is pretty much some of his footage from last year that went by. 2024 that went by. So, about a year and a half ago, but this is most up to date. They still have some of his stuff that's coming in right now, but this is a kid that actually is a dangerous weapon when you talk about at that linebacker spot. When you look at him, you're talking about a guy that's 6'3", 230 pounds, comes off the ball quick, can definitely go run through a blocker, gets to the quarterback, as you can see, quick first step, and shows up in a bad mood when he arrives in the backfield. Now, here's the other thing. As you can see, he was able to close the gap, make the tackle. Now, right here you go. Steps in the hole, makes a play, moves from sideline to sideline. And he's also got enough speed when you talk about being able to cover and do things. He's about a he's about 4'6", 4'7" guy with his speed or whatnot. But the 40 really doesn't impress me. I look at the tape and I turn it on and I see a kid that goes from sideline to sideline. And you're looking at how he's a sure tackler. He can also create turnovers. Very fundamentally sound, as I once said again. Look at him. Squares up, drops his butt, runs through the running back. Again, another way. He does wrap up. This is something that you don't see out of a lot of young players now, and this is something that you're seeing right here. Now, that play right there could have been a little bit better on the wrap up, but lastly, as you can see, when he hits the pocket, he does it at full speed, and he's one of those guys that shows up in a bad mood. Now, when you look at the Falcons defense at this point, the Falcons have a Divine Diablo in that backfield. You got a Christian Harris, who you just got from Houston. You pretty much got a Jalen Walker, who's an edge / linebacker. But if you were to add this guy into the rotation, you're talking about a guy that has height, a guy that can run, a guy that can also cover and play in zone in the pass. He's a bit of a tweener when you talk about linebacker, a hybrid linebacker / safety. But he's a guy that I would trust in a situation where I got to put him on a running back. I know he can run with him. I got to put him on a tight end. I know he can run with him. Now, the one thing that he might end up doing, because all grown folks do it, he's going to put on a little bit of weight. That's going to happen over time. He's going to have to get his grown man weight when he gets to the NFL. But you have to also remember, some of these kids don't have the resources and the facilities that the bigger schools have, but they don't make it as an excuse, because as you can see, they step up, they make plays, and they let you know that they can play football. All they need is an opportunity. And that young man could play in a Jeff Ulbrich defense. I believe that if he was to come here to Atlanta, I think he would have, if I got to compare him to an old school Falcon, I got an old school Falcon, I got a new school Falcon for you. If I got to compare him to an old school Falcon, for my old school Falcon fans out here, he reminds you of a Joel Williams, a guy that can run, a guy that can tackle, a guy that's heads up, and a guy that's highly intelligent when it comes to football. And he takes gambles when they're necessary, and he can create turnovers. For the new school Falcons, I would have to say he's a little bit of a cross between a Devondre Campbell. He doesn't have the speed that Devondre has, but when you look at the mean streak and how he attacks ball carriers, that right there is something that he can bring to the table, and he creates turnovers. So I think that he would actually be a great fit for the Falcons when you look at the defense and also looking at the linebacker depth. We can never have enough linebackers. We saw that last year when Divine Diablo went out. You got to add to your linebacking core, and I think that young man would be perfect. But we're going to switch it over to the MEAC for a second, because we have a young man that I spotlighted before. I'm going to play the spotlight. If you've never seen it before, I got a spotlight for you. Gentleman's name is Mr. Eric Hunter. Eric Hunter is one of the best linebackers in the country, not just the MEAC, in the country. Out of Morgan State, literally he's number 2 in his school for tackles. So when you sit back and you look at it, this young man is somebody that you really have to take serious when it comes to linebacking play. Because again, he was ranked among some of the best linebackers in the country, and that goes against some of the guys who were Butkus Award winners. He had numbers for that, but he played for a Morgan State team that wasn't that great. He's a Baltimore kid, and when you look at him, he's about 6'4" and around 235, 240, and he runs a 4.5 in his 40. He is not slow. So this is a little bit of Mr. Eric Hunter. Just going to introduce you if you haven't heard. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? You know what time it is. You either get right or you get left. Right now, we're going to talk a little bit about Mr. Eric Hunter, the best linebacker in the MEAC conference. That's just my opinion on that, but let's go ahead and talk about it. Mr. Eric Hunter, 6'4", 220 pounds, third team defense for the 2026
FCS Central All-American team. He definitely was a MEAC player that would have been the MEAC player of the year, but that was taken by another player that we're going to highlight a little later. He was number 2 in all-time tackles in school history for Morgan State with 298. He also had 102 tackles in 2025. 53 of those were solo, 14 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 1 interception, 1 block kick versus Norfolk State. Team that Michael Vick is coaching, and he got a touchdown off of it. His nickname is E40. He hits like a ton of bricks and definitely is a guy that you would want on this team. He has a consistent motor that continues to go, and he's also a team player. But when you get down to it, he can also play the edge as well as the outside linebacker as well as the Mike linebacker. If you want a comparison for this young man, I would say modern football player, he will remind you of a Divine Diablo that currently plays for the Atlanta Falcons when you look at what he brings to the table. But if you want to go old school and you talk about linebackers, he reminds you of a Chip Banks who used to play for the Cleveland Browns that came from USC. But enough about the old school guys and Divine Diablo. This is for Mr. Eric Hunter. He would be a steal for anybody in this draft. However, the question is this. Do you take him as an undrafted free agent, or do you get him as a lower round pick? However, you must replace JPJ's production because he's not going to be available this year with the Falcons. However, this young man, if he comes through the door for Atlanta, I think he would be a steal. And this kid reminds you a little bit of Jesse Tuggle too if he plays in the middle. So you guys leave your comments and concerns. Let me know what you think about him. Do some little bit of research on him. We'll definitely catch you next time.
So when you look at this kid, we have footage on some of these players, but some of the players we don't have footage on. We're definitely going to make sure that we describe it for you, or even give you some of the clips so you can at least have an idea of what they are. But when you look at Eric Hunter, he's another one that would fit this team. You pretty much saw what he did. Sideline to sideline, will square up and hit you in your chest. Has no fear. One of those guys that can change the tide of a game at the drop of a dime. He's done it. And when you look at the consistency with this guy, the Eagles have looked at him. Baltimore has looked at him because they're right in there. He's right in their backyard. You talk about the Giants have looked at him. The Falcons need to look up the road and look at him. You don't have linebacker depth right now. Guess what? If you get an undrafted free agent in the linebacker spot, that is a kid that you can actually bring into Atlanta as well, just like Reed Pullingham, and he can actually start. Yeah, I said it. I believe he can start. Most people aren't going to try to give him that because, well, he's an undrafted free agent. Guess what? There's a lot of undrafted free agents that are in the Hall of Fame. Drew Pearson was a quarterback that converted to being a wide receiver and became a Hall of Famer. Kurt Warner, undrafted free agent, Hall of Famer. I can go on. Many Hall of Famers that are undrafted free agents. That kid has that type of ability to be a great player in the NFL, especially in what we do in our scheme. But if anybody was to get him, he's a dangerous, dangerous player that could be, put it this way, the best way to describe it is this. He could either be your best friend if you got him, or he could be your worst enemy and you don't want to see him. That is the type of impact that that young man has on the defensive side of the ball. So I like him. I think he's somebody that we could bring in and we could do a few things with. But, and matter of fact, I'm going to throw it out here. Even though he's not a Hall of Famer, thank you, Nando. What's going on, Pam? What's going on, Nando? What's going on, Graybeard? Jesse Tuggle, most folks forget, he was an undrafted free agent. All he needed was a phone call. He got it and pretty much held down the job from 1987, the year I was born, until 2000, 13 years, and was one of the greatest Falcons that we ever had. Now, the other thing that we can also look at, we have to look at, I'm speaking on defense right now, we definitely got to look at corner. That is something that we really haven't talked much about. We've talked about it, but we really have not talked about it in a sense of where you have to say, well, damn, we need a corner right now. We need somebody that's going to come in here, that's going to make plays, that's going to do a few things that is going to change the trajectory of what we have going, you got to get you a corner. So starting off, we're going to start off with a young man by the name of Jamal Sam, nicknamed Pick Six. Doesn't have that much footage on him. They got some clips, but I will talk a little bit about Jamal. Excuse me. When you talk about Mr. Jamal Sam out of Benedict College, he's one of those guys where you actually have to understand that he's played at a different position. He's 5'11". He's really 6 feet tall, by the way. They say 5'11", but he's 6 feet tall, 190 pounds. And when you talk about him, he reminds me of a Brent Grimes. He's a kid out of New Orleans, Louisiana. So you already know he comes with a little bit of a swagger and a little bit of a Buccaneer type of mindset where he's going to take what's in your pockets. And that is what you have to have as a defensive back, whether you're a safety or whether you're a corner. He's one of those corners that he's got a Brent Grimes type of mindset, and he can play like him, which is scary. So what I'm going to do is pull up a little bit of this footage for you guys. It's just a couple of clips that he has. They really didn't put out too much footage, but he was one of the top players, top corners in HBCU football this year. 4'4", 4'5" guy in his 40. One of these guys that can definitely do some damage if you give him a chance to. So this is just a little bit of footage on Mr. Jamal Sam. So fair use, Jamal Sam.
7, we talked about it before. That is Jamal Sam.
Yeah, what's poppin', nigga? I know what's happening, man. Big Mike, you know what I'm saying? Poppin' on it, man. You know what's poppin'. Shit, we got that blue shit. You got that orange shit, you know, like the motherfucking meat. What you talking about?
So when you look at Jamal Sam, you pretty much see that he's a ball hawk. He's not afraid to come up and hit either. And as you can see, he's very quick when he comes downhill. That was against Clark, Atlanta, by the way, last season, where he was knocking folks out. And as you can see, the swagger is there, the attitude is there. When you look at him as a situational corner, played 11 games last year with 1 touchdown. Some of his stuff, the one thing I hate about going through the school's website, sometimes they don't post everything. But again, he's been playing for a little while. You look at him, and when you sit back and you pay attention to him as a player, he pretty much is a guy that's got a vertical jump of 30.5 feet. Broad jump is 9 feet 11. Again, he's a 4'5", 4'4" guy. And then he's not afraid to come up and hit you in the mouth. That is something that I really like about this guy. And when you sit back and you pay attention to how he's all over the field, as you can see, he's one of these guys that makes plays when you least expect it. Now, again, the attitude, the swagger, and so many things that come with it. And that kid is just somebody who can come into Atlanta and he could actually get a job on the field. Got the attitude, does not care, not afraid, and he's willing to take chances, and he's willing to come up and smack folks, and he's fundamentally sound. But when you talk about raw athleticism, he has it. 6 feet tall, around 190, he's got it. That is a guy that I would trust in the secondary because if you look at it, Coach DeBerry, who's now at South Carolina State, was his coach at one point. And when you look at what comes out of South Carolina State right now, Coach DeBerry was doing this at Benedict College. You're talking about a guy that was holding his guys accountable. You're talking about a guy who was literally putting himself in a position to be a great player. And he didn't want to be mediocre. And this is something that you have to look at when you're talking about a guy coming out of an HBCU playing corner. For number one, you're dealing with track stars all day. Not to be funny, ladies and gentlemen, look, we know we got speed at HBCUs. If we don't have one thing, we got speed. And that is something that you can't hide from. Now, all the bigger schools, you got guys that go through speed training and do all this stuff to garner their speed. A lot of these kids at these HBCUs are just country folks that can just run, or they're just kids that really can run. They have certain schools that have specialists too, but they're not getting the type of training that some of these kids are. So when you talk about raw ability and being able to move, counter, and they're fundamentally sound, That is one thing that I can tell you about a lot of these kids that I'm pointing out. They're very fundamentally sound, good footwork, good hands. I hate the fact that some of these guys struggled on a pro day. It's what it is. Some of them struggled. I hate that happened. But again, turn on the tape for some of these kids. Tape doesn't lie. You can run around in your drawers and your t-shirt all day. You can. It's easy to do that. It's a very different element when you put on that hat, those shoulder pads, and everything else, and you get ready to go to work. It's a very, very different environment. So when you really look back at the talent that's here, there's a ton of it. He's a guy that I bring in, and I'll tell you right now, he could challenge Kobe Bryant for a job, or he could possibly challenge Clark Phillips III for a job. Kid's got the talent like that, and he has nothing to lose, and he would come in here with a chip on his shoulder. So I would trust him coming into Atlanta and playing for the Falcons at this point. Now, another corner that I've talked about is a gentleman by the name of Gerard Washington. We really didn't get too heavy. I got heavy into him. I've talked about him, but when I look at Gerard Washington, Gerard is one of those kids that he's definitely somebody who can start because he plays not only special teams, he also plays corner, safety, and he can do it all. He's a guy that I would trust in a certain situation because of how he was coached, and he also came up big in the Celebration Bowl for South Carolina State Bulldogs. So when we look at some of these guys, you have to really look at the fact that some of these guys come out of situations where they either don't have grades or they can't get into schools, but it doesn't take away from what they can do. But I'm getting ready to put a little something up for Mr. Gerard Washington, and you guys can tell me what you think in the chat. Welcome, folks. Thank you for coming in. Like I said, I'm not going to be all night tonight because we got the Hawks on tonight, and we got to root them on to beat these New York Knicks. So right now, we got Gerard Washington coming up, South Carolina State University. Fair use.
Is on. Jared Washington, defensive back, South Carolina State, 6'2", 190 pounds, 4'4", Man, when you look at what he's done within the 25 games that he's played, it's just as unforgettable as Martin Luther King's last speech. So let's go ahead and talk about it. 75 tackles, 63 solos, 1 tackle for loss, 4 interceptions with 3 touchdowns attributed to those interceptions, 33 pass breakups, 1 fumble recovery, 1 return field goal block. When you look at him, size, hands, speed, and very fundamentally sound when you talk about how this young man is when it comes to being a coverage corner. The only things that you have to worry about is his early acceleration. He anticipates a little too much. He might miss some tackles here and there, but that right there can be worked on. If you want to look at the comparison of this young man, I compare him to 80s and 90s, should be in the Hall of Fame, but one of the best cornerbacks in Albert Lewis, who played for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Las Vegas Raiders. When you look back at it, he can definitely have some upside with whoever drafts him. I'd love the Falcons to look at him, but we will definitely see because they still have their pro days coming up, and he still can impress a lot more scouts on the radar. So that's going to wrap it up for Mr. Jared Washington. You know how we get down.
You either get right or you get left.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is Jared Washington out of South Carolina State. I got something on his teammate that we're going to be talking about. He's a wide receiver coming up. But when you look at Washington, I'm with you on this. Washington is going to be a problem. Whoever gets him, he's going to be a problem. Now, most folks don't know this, but Albert Lewis is that I compared him to was a Grambling State alum and played under the legendary Eddie Robinson and his staff that won 9 championships. And this is something else. Albert Lewis also used to work with Willie Brown, Hall of Fame corner that came out of Grambling. So when you talk about passing knowledge on, this kid physically reminds me a lot of Albert Lewis. He's not scared to hit you. He's not scared to cover. And he's a guy that does it all. He's a guy that's made similar plays, similar to that. Same build, same mindset, same competitive nature. And if Washington gets an opportunity to get to the league, I'll be honest with you, whoever gets him is going to get a steal because he's one of those guys that's going to work his way up the depth chart and become a starter. He's got that type of talent, period. And he went to the East-West Shrine game this year and outran everyone that was there and did not really give up anything while he was there. Go check his scouting report if you don't believe me. He jumped off the page to a lot of scouts. A lot of guys don't pay attention to him during the season, but they saw him when he was there. And he took advantage of that opportunity and just showed out. Shut down some of the best receivers in the country that came from bigger schools. He was fundamentally sound, tough, and fast. If you remember last week, we had Stanford Route on the show. Shout out to Stanford coming through, one of the best corners during his time. He was on the other side of Nnamdi Asomugha and had the lowest burn rate. If you know, you know. But if you didn't catch the interview, check it out. We got it on the page. When you look at him, this young man just fits the mold of a shutdown corner physically. Now, he's going to take his lumps. It's just what it is. He's got to get the speed of the game like everybody else, but the natural ability to play corner is there. It really is there. Now, the question is, who gives him the opportunity? I would like for the Falcons to get him. Here's my thing. I like to spotlight HBCU kids to give them an opportunity, as I said earlier, but I would like for the Falcons to start giving some of these young men chances, because if you're willing to go to Montana State, North Dakota State, and all these other schools, you pretty much have gone to Clemson, and you see that it's been dog water. Let's be honest. AJ's probably one of the few, and Grady. Other than that, everything else you've taken from Clemson has been horrible. Some of these players couldn't push a biscuit off of a plate with a hot fork if you gave it to them. Don't have a heartbeat. Not tough enough. Let's be real. I'm sorry to say it. Same with the University of Florida players that have come here. Y'all can say what you want, but the proof is in the pudding. Give me a guy that's going to be hungry. Give me a guy that's not going to be one of these dudes that is just going to come in here and just be on a situation where you say, well, damn. We thought we were getting this, and guys get a couple of paychecks and they forget that, hey, man, you still got to earn that check. My thing is give guys that are hungry this. I'm sorry. We got an infatuation with these dudes from the West Coast, and they haven't been panning out. It's just what it is. Or you've been going after the wrong players. You passed on a lot of guys in your backyard, and it's a ton. And think about it. South Carolina State, Orangeburg is not that far from Atlanta. You're right up the road. You're literally right up the road. Jump in your car and just go watch. Send one of your scouts up there to watch. Because the one thing we know about Coach DeBerry, he's going to have guys that are going to be physically tough, mentally tough, and they're going to be in great condition, and they're going to be fundamentally sound, and they can play, and they have athletic ability. Give them a chance. You bring something like that to Atlanta at that corner spot, he's going to take his lumps. And for those naysayers out there, oh, he's sorry. Why would you go after a guy like that? Guess what? You apparently see that we're still waiting on the tight end that we drafted in the first round to still produce. We're still waiting on a first-round quarterback that played in the national championship game to produce. We're still waiting on guys to get their asses out of trouble like JPJ. So all I'm saying is this. Coach DeBerry, what's going on, Tonio? Yeah, no, I mentioned Coach Berry's program with Benedict because Jamal Sam, who I pointed out, cornerback, is one of his guys that he actually has. So I mentioned him already. He's one of the most respected coaches. Another one that I'm going to bring up is going to be Coach Diego Ryland, who coaches at Virginia Union right now. So trust me, I know all about Coach. Believe me when I tell you that. Coach DeBerry is definitely one of those guys that I actually enjoy watching, love his program, and I'll be 100 with you. I think if he was at a Division I school, I think he could win a national championship because of how he runs his program. And he did it at South Carolina State. Just literally ran through the MEAC. But we're going to go ahead and get back to it. But before we get to our next player eval that we're going to do, we got to take a quick commercial break. Y'all be good.
Tap in every Thursday night at 8 p.m. for the Birdcage LLC with the magnificent Birdcage crew, getting it in and talking Falcon football every Thursday at 8. If you don't get that, we also got On the Perch for you. We have special guests that come through during the off season, and then we also have Bumper to Bumper in the morning where you get your morning fill of the historian's thoughts, man. You know how we get down, man. Tap into it.
You either get right or you get left. Jokes.
Welcome back. Had to pay some bills, but we're going to go ahead and talk about his teammate. We just got done talking about Gerard Washington. Iron sharpens iron. So when you talk about his teammate, we're looking at Jordan Smith out of South Carolina State. If you did not catch the Celebration Bowl, Jordan Smith literally took over that game. And it's not just that game that he took over. He's one of these guys that could be a number 2 receiver. He really could. He could be a slot receiver that you can have that's consistent. And when you talk about it, good speed, good hands, he's a poor man Steve Smith. You can look at the footage. If you don't believe me, I got it for you. But I would compare him to Steve Smith in his playing style. But this is Jordan Smith out of South Carolina State. Fair use. And that's against the University of South Carolina. He had a hell of a day that day. Go look at his numbers. Great balance and contact. Not afraid to get down in there and mix in, as you can see. High points to football, as you can see. One of these guys that definitely is shifty and definitely will get to you. Takes the end around really well. Heard a little running back in high school. As you can see, one of these guys that can definitely hurt you if you allow him to. And he can go up and get the ball in traffic. Not going to sit there and play the whole thing because, again, when you look at him, he's one of those guys that really is extra competitive. When you talk about him, you talk about a guy that's not the biggest on the field, around 5'11", 100, around I'd say about 185. Can probably put on a little bit more weight. But when you look at him, he's one of those guys that can definitely make some stuff happen with the ball in his hand. He's played against top talent this year, against some D1 schools, USF, South Carolina, University of South Carolina, and he's hung in there. He's made some of these guys from bigger schools literally look like average Joes, if you want to be frank. And when you look at what he does, he catches with his hands. He's not a body catcher. He catches with his hands. He goes and attacks the football with those hands of his, just like that. You saw it in the footage. Great contact balance. One of these guys that could possibly hide behind blockers. You can use him on an end around if you want to take the ball out of Bijan's hand. This guy has playmaking ability. And the one thing we've lacked at the wide receiver position is big playability. Let's just be honest. Darnell Mooney was inconsistent. When he had the ball in his hands, he made plays. But this is a guy that's going to work his tail off. He's going to be very competitive, and he's going to push everybody in that room. Yes, Drake is the number 1 for right now. He definitely is. He's a first-round pick. But I think that Drake would balance out with a guy like that with that type of competitive fire in his blood. Remember, Steve Smith wasn't a top draft pick like that either. And when he got his opportunity, he took it and ran with it. Started off as a special teams ace and then moved into being a slot and then moved into being the number 1 guy. Because remember, situation with Muhsin Muhammad. Muhammad was the number 1 until Steve Smith got his opportunity. And we saw who took most of those snaps. And Steve Smith used to give us hell all the time. That is a guy that plays just like Steve Smith. Tough, talk trash, get in your face. He's one of those guys, and he's not afraid to mix it up with you. He will put hands on you if he needs to. Now, another guy that we got to bring up, and we gonna keep it on the offensive side of the ball for a little bit. We always talk defense on the show, but we gotta talk a little offense for my folks out here that like points to be put up. And when you also look at the running back room, yeah, we got Brian Robinson Jr. He's got experience, but I'm gonna give you this. Shout out to Coach, Shout out to Coach Diego Ryland for producing he produced the first HBCU award winner for the Harlan Hill Award. Harlan Hill Award is pretty much like their Heisman. He was one of the best in the country this year. So we got Mr. Curtis Allen that we're going to spotlight. So out of Virginia Union, Jada Byers had over 2,000 yards. This cat had over 2,300 yards this year. So we're going to go ahead and put this up for you guys. Want you guys to enjoy this. This is a guy that I've been preaching on, and I still think the Falcons can get him as an undrafted free agent for depth purposes. I'll take him over Carlos Washington or even the kid out of Michigan State who we got. Y'all can say what you want, but this is a guy that I know that I can trust, and I know what Coach Ryland puts out on that field when it comes to running backs. So fair use, fair use, fair use. This is Curtis Allen.
What's going on today? Spotlight is on Curtis Allen, the nation's Harlan Hill Award winner. Let's go ahead and talk about it. This young man averaged over 100 yards a game, ended up with 2,409 yards rushing. He broke Danny Woodhead's single-season rushing record for D2 schools. He also led all of the NCAA with 30 touchdowns, and he's the first player out of Virginia Union, the CIAA HBCU, to win the Division II Player of the Year award. Again, Allen consistently generated chunk plays in college due to his elite vision, his patience, his power, and his years as a backup under Jada Byers, the other 2,000-yard rusher that he got to learn from, definitely helped him out when you talk about how he learned the game. Blocking schemes is his best trait. The ability to wait for blocks to develop, that right there is hard for a running back to do, but he does that. In short area bursts, he has quickness, and he also has a load once he comes downhill. You're talking about a guy that's 6'2", 215 that runs with a full head of steam and is definitely hard to bring down. He also ran through linebackers, safeties, and also delivered blows with straight line speed and a path with that. The competition level is obviously a concern, but when you talk about the vision, the blend of patience, discipline, power, and speed, man, all you can do is really look at the fact that this kid is one of the best to ever do it at that level. But if I got to compare him to somebody, I'm going to compare him to a young Edgerrin James when you talk about the speed, the power, the vision, the balance, and also being relatively unknown. This is what happens. But, hey, we're going to sit back and watch how they play it out, and we're going to see what type of opportunities this young man gets. So that's a wrap for Mr. Curtis Allen today, man. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, drop it down in the link down below. And also tap in with us this week so you know how we get down.
You either get right or you get left. Jokes.
So that right there is Mr. Curtis Allen. Now, I have another guy that I'm going to bring up for you on this.
Today's hunting ground spotlight is on Chris Mosley. We see you out there. We see you getting that work in, young man. Let's get to it. So my name is Ryan Walker, a.k.a. The Historian. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Chris Mosley today. Speedy, tough, quick, durable, high football IQ, has a lot to work on, but definitely is a guy that can bring a lot to a team. When you sit back and you look at what he brings to the table, he has great vision, great contact balance, excellent vision, jump cut ability. And then you look at what schemes he would fit in. You got your power schemes. You have the gap schemes that he would fit in. His toughness as a running back and his ability to fall forward is what would keep him employed in the NFL. Now, the only cons is he's a little stiff, limits his movement. And when you sit back and you think about it, him as a wide receiver, it's going to take some work. The great Walter Payton took work as well coming out of HBCU, learning how to play the receiver position, but it did not hinder the production that he had coming out of the backfield because they were about the same size. Walter just had a little bit more weight. But when you look at this kid, he's definitely somebody that will bring a lot of attention to being able to be patient, get through the gaps, run through tackles, if they're arm tackles, and even if they're not arm tackles. He enjoys contact and he looks for ways to be able to dominate. But the only knock is his size and him being able to come out of the backfield. But that can be worked on, as I said earlier. When you see this young man run, you see heart, desire, and the best part about it, he has no quit in him and he does not back down from anything or anyone. So if you're going to give this young man a look, please take a look at his footage, hit the like, subscribe button, and also hit your comments down below. We definitely appreciate you for tapping in. Definitely check out some more videos that we have for the Hunting Ground Spotlight.
So that's Chris Mosley out of North Carolina Central. So if we're gonna sit back and talk about it, I just gave you 2 running backs. We were talking about depth issues. Those 2 could probably fit in either one. I want Curtis Allen. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I would prefer to have Curtis Allen because, again, I know what program he comes out of. I know what Coach Barry does. I know what Coach Diego Ryland does with his running backs, and he's well known, not just on the HBCU level. He's also known on the FCS side and and pretty much the D1 side of the house. It's unfortunate that he has not been offered a bigger position at some of these schools, because a lot of his running backs and the techniques that he teaches these guys are a little bit better than some of these guys in the top tier. But again, some of these coaches that are on the HBCU level, I feel as if can relate to the kids a little bit more, and some of them have a little bit more knowledge. Football ain't a complicated game. Keep it simple, as Coach Ryland would say. So when you look at Chris Mosley impressed me when he finally took over the reins this year for North Carolina Central. Didn't have the numbers that he should have had this year, but when you look at his impact, go back and look at the game he played against my Southern University Jaguars. He literally had himself a day. We couldn't stop him. And what's ironic is one of the best players on the field, who was all SWAC, first team all SWAC 2 years in a row, Mr. Kelby Givens, couldn't do anything with him either. And we got Kelby Givens spotlighted too. But we don't have an official video for him, but we got some highlights for him, and I'm going to break that down for you live. But when you look at these 2 running backs, Curtis Allen is power, speed, vision, patience. He's a young Edgerrin James. That is what you see. Young Edgerrin James, same build, same movement, and it reminds you of that. When you look at Chris Mosley kind of has a similarity to a Warwick Dunn. He's a little bit bigger than Warwick, but you look at the fact that he's a slasher. Warwick slashed on you. He'd give you a fake here and there, but it was slash and speed. He'd give you a shoulder if he needed to. Mosley is a guy that you can trust in that situation. Now, the only thing that I would say Mosley has to work on is becoming a better receiver out of the backfield. I think he can catch, but I think he has to get better at it. Hell, Walter Payton's a Hall of Famer, and that's my idol. He said he struggled with that when he first got to the NFL. He taught himself how to be a great receiver by going through all kinds of drills, working with the wide receivers, and you got to remember, it was just a different time. Walter was a Renaissance man. He could also throw the football too. But when you sit back and you pay attention to it, that young man is probably I'll say this, he probably would be a 6th round pick. Curtis Allen, 3rd, 4th round pick type talent. I haven't been wrong about my HBCU guys so far. Because if you look at it, unfortunately, Marquise Bell got in trouble with the law. It happens. Young, stupid. It's just what it is, young and stupid. But guess what? Marquise Bell has been a dominant presence in the NFL, coming as an undrafted free agent to the Dallas Cowboys to being able to sign his 2nd contract. Now, once his legal situations clear up, he'll be fine. But again, that is a guy that I talk about that we should have taken over Richie Grant. And what was funny was I got a lot of pushback for that. And a lot of people were saying I didn't know what I was talking about. And as I said before, Richie Grant was a victim of circumstances at UCF. Politics, man. Marquise Bell pretty much has been able to keep his job with the Dallas Cowboys. Let that marinate. Let that marinate. So again, when it comes to evaluating these HBCU players, Don't look at the name on the damn jersey. Look at the guys on the field and what they can do. I'll give you an early preview of a guy that should have came out this year, but he chose to come back because of the injuries, and he wants a higher possibility of even being drafted. Andrew Bodie, SWAC Player of the Year, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Think about this. He's ranked number 3 in the state of Texas in all time. When you look at his numbers, you look at what he's produced. Think about all the quarterbacks that have come out of the state of Texas in high school football, from Kyler Murray to Jalen Hurts to all these guys, Drew Brees, Matthew Stafford, all these guys that have come through there. He's ranked number 3. And the only reason he couldn't get into a bigger school was because of some academic issues, but it happens. But he started off at Texas Southern and went to Alabama State and showed his ass. It's just what it is. You can't take away from what these kids put on the field. And he's a guy that can start anywhere in the country. He could run, he could sling it. But he had to get his knee cleaned up a little bit, but he wants to have a little bit better tape this year. And that says a lot about his character, because he was offered money to go to Penn State. I live up here in Philly. I heard about it on the radio. They were going to try to bring him in, and he was going to compete for a starting job. Let that marinate, where they want to pay a kid from HBCU to come up and start at quarterback because they don't like what they have in their room. He chose to stay at Alabama State because of that. So he's a guy that'll be coming out next year. So if we can't get this quarterback situation straight with the Atlanta Falcons, hey, Ian, you got a guy that's in Alabama State, not that far up the road. Send somebody down there. You don't have to draft him. You don't. You can get him as an undrafted free agent or a lower round draft pick. He's one of those guys that can come in, and I'm not saying he's going to be a franchise quarterback, but he's a project, and guess what? He fits what you do. And here's the other thing. And his offensive coordinator is the head coach over there right now at Clark Atlanta. So, Ian, you got a plug right across the street. You can talk to him about it. Just saying. Got to throw that out there. But now I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the wide receiver position. We have a gentleman by the name of Mr. DeAndre Proctor. And DeAndre is one of those guys that that you can sit back and you can just say, well, damn, he's out of Johnson C. Smith, HBCU up in Carolina. When you look at his size, he's 6'2", 220 pounds. He's a senior. He's a 4'5", 4'6" guy. The speed doesn't jump out on the page. I get it. I understand. Remember this, ladies and gentlemen. There was a man that I played at the beginning of the show, which I'll probably end up playing again because I didn't come up with an exit, but it's all good. Jerry Rice ran a 4.7 in his 40, but nobody ever caught him from behind. Don't sit there and let that fool you. The 40 is nice, but the 40 is not all and be all. Physically, he's very talented, and he's one of those guys that can come in and he can work his way up the depth chart. And I think he could possibly be a guy that we could bring in that could be a possible playmaker for us. This is DeAndre Proctor, ladies and gentlemen. Fair use, fair use, fair use. And as you can see, he does kick returns and he does punt returns as well. Strong at the point of attack, and he definitely can take a lick, as you can see. He's not easily brought down. Now, this is just one of his games that he has against Winston-Salem State. Went off for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. And when you see that he can also move the chains, he can do a lot. He's a very dangerous player. So again, he's not a little guy. He's a guy that can come in, and he's a guy that can do a few things. He's right up the road in Charlotte. It's Carolina Panthers country. I would rather keep him away from what we have. So that is another guy that you can look at. 6'2", 220. When you look at what he brings to the table, when you talk about strength on the bench, he didn't bench press for anybody, but you can tell the kid is a strong kid. You can tell he really, I'm sorry. He got 20, they say he got 17 reps on 225, but I also read in a report he's done it 25 times. So the strength is there. When you look at the fact that he's got a vertical jump of 30, his broad jump is pretty much 9 feet long. And he's one of these guys that can come in here and his game is just, I wouldn't even know who to even compare him to because of the physicality he brings. He's not a Julio because Julio had speed and so did Roddy White. When you look at him as a receiver that can do it all, I can't put him in that category. If I had to compare him to a wide receiver, he remind me a little bit of a Kevin Dyson who played for the Tennessee Titans back in the day. Great receiver, good hands, strong, physical at the point of attack. And hell, you know what? I'm even go further. I'm gonna give him a little bit more respect than that. I can say he kind of reminds me a little bit of Jimmy Smith from the Jacksonville Jaguars. The speed isn't like Jimmy's, but the way that he catches the football, the way that he attacks defenders, the way that he makes things happen, it's a little like Jimmy Smith. You got to remember, him and Keenan McCardell were called Thunder and Lightning. He was the Thunder. McCardell was the Lightning, which was just flat out just speed. But that is a guy I would look at when we talk about him. He's just an amazing specimen physically. But the question is, would Atlanta give him a chance? We talk about receiver depth. We talk about so many things that we have going on right now. But we have to be in a spot to where we look at these guys, and this is one of the best things that happened is just being able to see these guys play firsthand. And then it helps when their coaches post footage. So for the coaches that are watching, because we got a couple of HBCU coaches watching tonight, appreciate you guys for tuning in. Post more footage of your guys. Please post it because people need to see this talent. People need to see what these guys bring to the table. Now, getting off of that, I got to get down to the trenches. Get right back to the trenches now. We've done the wide receiver spot. We've done the running back spot. We've done the cornerback spot. We've talked about linebackers. Let's get into the trenches. We got one edge rusher, and I got 2 offensive linemen I'm going to talk about, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. Now, there's a young man that plays at the Southern University, Mr. Kelby Givens, who I spoke on earlier, who Chris Mosley just pretty much abused him and that whole defense. But Southern was a mess this year. We didn't have anything right. Our head coach was just not that good, and it was just what it is. But this is Kelby Givens out of Southern University. Where's number 1? When you look at Kelby, just to give you a little background on him, Kelby was the Defensive Player of the Year in 2024. He was the Bayou Classic MVP in 2024. He was preseason first team all SWAC, and then also he was the 2025 he was on the 2025 National Player of the Year award watch list. And the other player that was on there, we talked about him earlier, was Eric Hunter. So that's a hell of a company to be in. So fair use, fair use, fair use. This is Kelby Givens.
Terrell now joining him in the backfield. Freshman out of Atlanta. Trying to provide some protection, and Morgan just throwing it away.
And Kelby Givens is a defensive lineman.
The junior out of Shreveport in on the last 2 plays for the defense.
And as you can see,
they try to run it up
fights
the middle
off the tackle.
And no dice.
So you call the timeout.
He's fighting off the tackle. They're doubling that side for a reason. If you're noticing, they're putting the H back over there as well. But if you can see, he's getting in that backfield. He's sacking. And this was in the SWAC championship in 2024. He had a hell of a day, even though Jackson State won that day and went on to win the national championship. But as you can see, he's quick coming off the edge, and the tackle couldn't do anything with him.
Come over and pull and block him. But the
so right here, as you can see, that first step is hell. Now, this is just some of his footage with Jackson State. He's got a couple of more videos out. As you can see, he crashes. He got beat a little. He got beat pretty much. Got hooked. Got to get in. You know, he's not a small guy. Got some strength on him, but again, everybody gets beat. We've seen it. Now, we see good, we see bad, and as you noticed,
for the Jaguars.
I don't know if you paid attention to this. I'm going to run this back. Pay attention to this when we go back to this. Look at the top. I'm going to show you this here. Look at the top of this screen right here. He's got 3 people that he's got to deal with. He was chipped. He was pushed in the backfield. Now, if you can see that, that should tell you the type of dominance that that young man brings when you have to have 3 people to pretty much line up in front of him. Your tackle, your H-back, and then your other running back that literally are lining up offset. They made it very hard for him to get in the backfield, but he had a hell of a day that day in that SWAC championship. Now, he's a guy that reminds me a lot of John Abraham and a mixture of Claude Humphrey. Yeah, I said it. I'm not gonna leave the legendary Claude Humphrey out. A lot of people don't talk about him enough. That young man uses his hands like Claude, but that first step is like John Abraham. You see, when you have 3 people on that side to warrant 2 to 3 people, he was never one-on-one. The whole ball game, he was never one-on-one. All this year, he was never one-on-one. He demanded a double team. That should tell you the type of player that he is. If we lose JPJ, that's a guy that you can bring in as an undrafted free agent. That's a guy you can bring in as a late round draft pick. That is a guy that can come in here. You put him on a weight room program. He literally can come out here and he can ball. Just remember this. The legendary Richard Dent was paper thin. Murphy High School, Eastside Atlanta legend. Richard Dent from my ATLians in here that are watching. That kid right there pretty much is in the same situation. Put him in a situation where he can get a little bit more meat on his bones, a better diet, nutrition, and trainers that can help him get to that level. You see how dangerous he is, and he doesn't have that right now. He doesn't have those facilities. You put him in a top-tier program, guarantee you he would probably been one of the best pass rushers and edge rushers in the country. Film don't lie. You don't triple a guy if he's not dangerous. And that Jackson State team is the same team who won the national champion at Celebration Bowl, pretty much the national championship that Deion Sanders built. That kid, Kelby Givens, has dominated in the SWAC. Even when they played outside of the SWAC, he's been dominant. Just saying, he's a guy that I would look into if you can. Now, getting back to it, we got to talk a little bit about the big boys in the trenches. We got Mr. Bruno Rouzier. Now, he doesn't really have any footage on him right now. He transferred from the University of Maryland on down to Virginia State. Bruno Rouzier is 6'8". He's around 330. When you look at Bruno is one of those guys. Now, this is his offensive line right there. This is just Bruno right here. So this is about one of the best pictures you can get, except for him blocking. Now, I'll give you this. When you talk about Bruno 6'8", 320. 6'8", 320. His 40 time is 5.4. 5.4 at 320 pounds. He's a 2-time all CIAA conference. He's pretty much 2 times first team selection for the CIAA. 2024 CIAA Offensive Lineman of the Year. He's a reliable starter, multi-year starter. 3 years he was there. He started at left tackle. Guess what? We're going to need a replacement pretty soon for Jake Matthews. I said it again. We're going to need a replacement for Jake Matthews. 6'8", 320. Bill Callahan can do something with that. And he runs a 5'4". Now, here's the other thing. He had minimal football experience with Maryland, pretty much didn't play much. And then he transfers to Virginia State. And then he refined his game and he grew into the CIAA's most accomplished lineman. That says a lot because if you look up the road, that Virginia Union School with Coach Ryland produces killers on that offensive line. And to me, I feel like they have the best offensive line in the CIAA, in my opinion, because You had a running back to go over 2,400 yards this year. But Virginia State also produces some big boys too, and this is one of them. Here's the thing that we got to talk about. Here are the pros. He plays right, and he plays right and left tackle. So he plays both tackle spots. He's got extension. He's got pass protection. He's got upside at the tackle position. That's pretty much great size. Makes it hard for a speedy backer to get there. Now, he's got great balance for a big man, good foot speed, great body control. He was, played a little basketball growing up. That's what helped him out. Now, here are the bad things about him. He needs more experience. That's why sitting behind a Jake Matthews would be perfect for a guy that size. Now, I think he needs to slim down to probably about 315, in my opinion. 315. Because I think that would actually help him out with being able to move a little bit better with some speedier guys. He also has to get his pad level consistently at an angle where he doesn't give this much of his chest when he's engaging in blocks and giving a defensive player the ability to grab you and pretty much put you in a spot to where you're going to get pulled around. Now, here's the other thing that he does. He has to give a lesser window for a defender. Pass protection run blocking isn't the problem. Pass protection is not bad. The only thing that kills him with the pass protection, as I already said, was this: opening that chest. I told everybody about Carson Vincent last year. That was my guy. I watched him for 4 years at Alabama A&M. There's a kid at University of Georgia right now by the name of Tykees Richardson who played with Carson Vincent. He didn't give up a sack, but right now he's getting groomed at University of Georgia right now. So again, when you look back at everything that goes on with a Carson Vincent, his comparison physically in modern day football would be a little bit of a Carson Vincent. Got to work on a few things, but it's very similar with size. But if I go old school football because of what he brings to the table, Lord Jesus, Larry Allen. He's a freak athlete just like Larry Allen was. Most people don't understand how good and how great the late, great Larry Allen was when it came to that. He's one of those guys that you can trust. He's one of those guys that you can rely on to make a play. Hell, I watched him chase down a defensive back who got a pick this year. Just like Larry Allen chased down that damn linebacker went from the Saints. So again, this is a guy who can run. This is a guy who can block. He just has little things that he has to work on. Now, there's another player that I've talked about, and I've put in this situation by the name of Ashton Grable. They don't really have much footage of him either, and he's out of FAMU. Now, the one thing that I can say about Ashton Grable, and he's a Georgia guy, by the way. And when you sit back and you think about it, that's a homegrown guy that ended up going to Florida A&M at FAMU. Now, I'm going to give you his size. He's 6'4", 315 pounds. He transferred in from Jacksonville State. That is where he started at. Now, I'm just going to put up this here. He played at Gordon High School, pretty much Gordon, Georgia. Here you go. These are some of his sizes. You can see he's a big man, number 71. Don't really have too many great pictures, but these are some of the pictures you can see. FAMU just wanted to show the lighter side of his personality. But I can tell you up front, that is just not the light side of his personality. Now, here's the thing. They don't post their numbers, but I'm going to give you this. He showed out at the Senior Bowl when he was there. I could give you, let me see. I'm going to see if I can find a bigger picture for you. So you can actually see how massive this young man is. And they don't have a full picture of him, but they don't, and it kills me that they don't want to have a full picture of him or whatnot, but it's okay. But I'm going to talk about him anyway. Let's see. Maybe they do have one. Nope. But, oh well. This is a guy, as I told you before. I just pulled this up for you guys right here. Let My stuff doesn't want to cooperate. This is the joys of doing this live. But here you go. About as good as we can get. Now, when you talk about Ashton Grable, he plays more than one position. He plays tackle and he plays guard. He's excellent in pass protection. He's an effective run blocker. He's also very agile as a big man. Then you look at it, he flies off the ball and moves defenders around. Now, the one thing that he has to get better at, pad level. That's something I keep preaching, pad level. Now, he's also got to work on getting off a little bit quicker off the snap. And when I say getting off quicker, I'm not saying that he's slow, but when he gets against those speed rushers, he's got to be able he's got to jump. He's got to be able to jump. Now, if I got to compare him to a player, I'm going to compare him to a guy that played for the Dallas Cowboys, but he also came out of Central State University and he played for one of the gentlemen who came on the show as HBCU coaching legend, as well as a Villanova Hall of Famer, a Super Bowl champ, 7-time national champ. He played for Coach Billy Joe. When you talk about Eric Allen, played for Billy Joe, North Philly guy, went to Coach Joe, and Coach Joe coached my old high school coach, and they won the national championship down at FAMU. Now, this kid is very similar to Eric Williams that played for the Cowboys. If you don't know about that offensive line, Eric Williams was the nasty one. He was the mean one. Everybody talks about Larry Allen. Everybody talks about Nate Newton. But guess what? Eric Williams was the mean one. And that kid has the same mentality and makeup as an Eric Williams. Physical, nasty, shows up in a bad mood, does not like even his own teammates on some days. We need that on this offensive line. So when we sit back and we keep paying attention to this, man, this is one of the best things that we can continue to do is by putting all these kids out. That is something that I'm really big on. We got to keep putting these kids out because they don't get enough opportunities. They're better than some of these guys that we have on the roster right now. I know I wasn't going to be able to go through everybody, but I had to go through a decent amount of players for you guys because, again, the Falcons literally have gold mines. You got gold mines and you got diamonds. And if you can't figure this out, you have to question it. Right now at this point, I need Ian Cunningham to step up, and I'm going to say it. I need you to step up, Ian, and I need you to start sending your guys up to some of these schools that are near away. Hell, you got Fort Valley State that's around the way. They did well. Up under Quinn Gray. Right now, fam is going through a situation where they're not going to be eligible to play for a bowl game this year. Possibly, with some academic stuff might mess up the season. And Quinn Gray walked into a bad situation. Hate it. But still a lot of talent there. You got talent at Howard University. Edgerrin James' son is a hell of a running back. Yeah, we talked about him earlier this season. I showed footage of him. So many talented players that can't get an opportunity because everybody's looking at the bigger schools and everybody already knows that a lot of the bigger schools are invested financially with the NFL. Now, I'm an independent guy, and I can speak on this. Now, if I was working for a network, I wouldn't be able to tell that type of truth. I'd have to stifle myself. But I don't work for a network. I'm independent. And my thing is, I'm okay with it. I'm a small voice in a large crowd of noise. My thing is, I just think I can make my noise a little bit louder with me projecting my voice a little bit more. So the way that I project this is this. The Falcons at least need to give 2 to 3 guys out of HBCU an opportunity, whether you draft one or whether you just bring 3 of those guys in as undrafted free agents. All the positions that I pointed out were positions of need, period. So, again, continue to keep doing this. And my thing is this. Ian, if you ever need somebody to if you ever want to give somebody a job to be a scout at HBCUs, I'll do it. I have no problem with doing it. I have no problem with being your feet to the ground. I have no problem with being in a situation to where I can sit on the sideline, talk to the coaches, and find out diamonds for you. That's no problem for me. Because again, if you don't do it, I will. Because those kids deserve a chance, just like all the rest of these kids that are coming out of these big time schools. So don't forget about these HBCU boys. They stand on the shoulders of many people that built the NFL. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you guys for tapping in with your boy tonight. Had to do a little something for these guys. And again, thank you for tuning in, because it means a lot that you guys would even take time away from your schedule just to talk about kids that are from the HBCUs that don't get enough credit. So thank you again for tapping in with your boy, the historian. We possibly will have an interview with Coach Tony Carter on Thursday night on the first night of the draft. Even if we don't, it's cool. We'll have a regular show. Tony Carter used to play for the Denver Broncos, and he also was a high school rival of mine, and he's coaching currently right now at Central State University, same school that I just talked about with Eric Williams. So y'all tap in with us on Thursday. If not, it's cool. We're going to have a draft show on Friday. So y'all tap in and we got you covered, man. This is your boy, the historian. We out. Ghost.